Hi everyone, this is Vin from Chive, and in this video I'll be showing you how to make this name card fairy. I love this design. It's just a sweet little fairy you can use to hold names at a fairy party, or you could use her to hold food labels at a candy table. You could even use her to hold sweet little notes. You could give her away as a gift and maybe include a message on the name card instead of a name. Just a lot of ways you can use her. So let's get started. Here are the materials you'll be needing. The X-Acto knife is not absolutely necessary. You can use anything with a sharp point, and you'll see why later. The double-sided tape I use has lining on it, and I'll put a link to it down below. Before we jump into assembling the fairy, I just want to show you a few things. So the basic assembly of the fairy is with two fairies that are mirror images of each other. So you'll be creating these two fairies first, and then you'll be taping and gluing them together just like this. Now I just want to go over the different cutouts that you'll see in your download. You'll see 3 different fairy bodies in your file. The 3 fairy bodies are actually the same except for the wing attachments. The first fairy you'll see has what we'll call the wing accent attached to her back. And the second fairy you'll see will have the full wing attached to her back. And the third fairy has nothing attached to her back. The reason I included these 3 different bodies is so that you can create different color combinations with the fairy's body and her wings, and I'll show you that in a bit. You'll also see in your file 4 different wing pieces. One wing is the full wing, and it'll have this band attached to it, and another full wing without the band attached to it. As you can see here, the 2 wings are exactly the same. The only difference is that band and the dotted fold line. And the other 2 pieces are the wing accent pieces, and just like the wings, one has the band attached and the other one doesn't. And this band is simply for attaching to the fairy body. Now let's look at the different ways that you can make your fairy with these different cutouts. So for this fairy here, if you use the fairy body with the full wing attached, you'll also see a dotted fold line at the wing and at the legs. If the dotted lines are showing up as solid lines in your file, just change them back to dotted lines, or you can use a solid line to score the fold lines if your machine has that capability. So to complete this fairy, it's quite simple. You just take a wing accent piece like this one and attach it to the wing. You can either use glue or double-sided tape. And here I just want to talk about the wing accent piece. So if you take a close-up look at it, you'll see one side has a larger end piece than the other side, or more ridges, you could say. When you attach this piece to the fairy, make sure that the side with more ridges is closer to the fairy's head. It's not a big deal if you flip it over and attach it the other way. It'll just be a little bit closer to the fairy's head, maybe even overlap. But whatever way you choose to attach it, just make sure that you do the same with the other side. Again, not a big deal, just an aesthetic. And that's how you use the fairy with the body and the full wing attached. And here I'll show you how to use the fairy with the accent wing attached. So again, you'll see the dotted fold lines at the wings and at the legs. And for this piece, you can use the wing without the band attached to it. And again, just simply attach it up against the wing fold line, either with glue or with double-sided tape. And as you can see here, this one allows you to use a different color for her wing piece. And here is the fairy I'll be showing you how to make in this video. There's actually 2 ways you can make this fairy. You can use the wing accent piece with the band attached to it like you see here, and then attach the wing piece that doesn't have the band to it, and then together you attach those 2 to the fairy's body. Or you can use the wing accent piece that doesn't have the band attached to it and cut out a wing piece that does have the band attached to it. And I hope this is all making sense. You can attach the wing accent piece to the wing first, and then using the band that's attached to the wing, you attach both pieces to the fairy's body. And this will all become clearer as you create your fairy. But as you can see, with either combination of cutouts, you get the same fairy. Now let's get started on assembling our fairy. I just want to go over a couple more things with you. For the name card, I included a PDF and a Word document in your download, both of which you can enter the names into each card. Each card is 3 inches by 1.75 inches. You could very easily create your own name cards in another Word document. You can go bigger, but I'm not sure the maximum size this fairy will hold. I think if you go too big, her hand might not hold it that well, but you know, maybe you could try having 2 fairies holding a bigger card. Let me know in the comments down below if you try this. I think it could actually be pretty cool. And the last thing I want to mention is if you're using glitter paper like I am here, and glitter paper tends to be one-sided, so make sure that when you're cutting out your pieces, especially the ones that are going to be cut out using the glitter paper, make sure to, in your file, flip the pieces over when you go to cut them so that you get mirror images of each other like you see here. Otherwise, you're going to end up with the glitter on the same side, and then when you go to put it together, you're going to have one wing with glitter and the other wing will be the white facing out, which we don't want to happen. Okay, so let's get started on the assembly, finally. Sorry about the super long intro, but I do have a lot of beginner crafters as my customers, and I hope that my detailed explanation will make this one a little bit easier for you, but also this one has more than the normal number of pieces that my designs usually have, so I wanted to take the time to explain the pieces to you. So these are the cutouts you'll need to create the fairy in this video. It's 6 pieces altogether. And no matter which cutouts you decide to use to create your fairy, once you assemble both fairies, you're going to be putting them together the same way. So for this fairy, I'm going to be using these 3 pieces as I showed you earlier. And for attaching the wings to the fairy, I used double-sided tape. So just cut a few pieces of double-sided tape, just enough to cover that band that you see here at the wing base, and I use tape with lining on it, and you can remove that with your X-Acto knife. And this is all I'll be using my X-Acto knife for, is to remove the lining on the double-sided tape. So you can use anything you want. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, you can use a pin or any other knife, or even your nail. So here, first I attach the wing piece to the fairy body, and you just line up her back edge to the wing fold line. For this part, just make sure that you're not going over the wing fold line with the fairy's body, because if you do that, you're going to have trouble opening up the wing when you put her together. And now we'll attach the accent piece to the wing. And again, for this, I just cut a couple pieces of double-sided tape, remove the lining, again with the X-Acto knife, and then place the accent piece on. And as I said before, make sure the end with the larger piece, or the 3 ridges versus the 2, is closer to her head. And here again, you line up the edge of the accent piece with the edge of the fairy's back. And there you have it. We have one fairy done, and then you just need to create your second fairy. And your second fairy will be made the exact same way as your first, but just in the mirror image. So here are our 2 fairies, and next I'll show you how to put these 2 together. Start by reinforcing the folds of each fairy at her wing and at her legs. This will help in the gluing stage to determine the areas that we'll be gluing. And here I'm just making sure that I'm folding her legs in the right direction. Now, if you flip one fairy over, you'll see that the gluing area will be the head and the body area that is within the fold lines. And then when you get to her arms, we won't be gluing her hands together, but I'll help you out with that later on. So begin with flipping one fairy over, and here I'm going to measure the base of her wing. My base is about 1 5/8 inches across, and yours should be too, but if for some reason your fairy file opens up and it's small or too big, you can change the size. But just make sure that if you're going to change the size of your fairy, change the sizes of every piece in the file. So cut out a piece of double-sided tape that's about the same length as your wing base. My tape is about 5/8 inches in width, I think, and it's perfect for my fairy body. It's not too wide, so I'm just going to leave it and place it up against the wing fold line. And just press down on your tape to make sure it's making good contact with your fairy body. And now take your second fairy and align it on top of your first fairy. And if you guys have made any of my other designs, you'll be familiar with this step. So make sure your alignment is close to perfect. You can do this by lifting up the fairy if it helps you out. Now, once you have your two fairies aligned, hold down the head area with one hand, and then with your other hand, lift up the top fairy to reveal the tape underneath, and then reach in with your X-Acto knife or with any sharp object and remove the tape lining underneath. Now make sure you're holding down tight on the two fairies so that they stay in alignment. And then just press down your top fairy and press down on the tape area. And now we have a fairy that's ready to be glued together. The tape will hold the two fairies together so that we can just pry it open and apply the glue between the two fairies. So to start the gluing phase, begin by dispensing some white glue into a little container. You won't need much glue for this fairy. I would say maybe a pea-sized amount will be sufficient. So let's begin by gluing her leg area together. Just pry open the two fairies and then with a small paintbrush, apply glue to one fairy. Here I'm applying it to the bottom fairy so that I can see where the glue is going. And again, that dotted line at her legs, that dotted line at her legs is where the glue should stop. You should not glue her legs together, otherwise your fairy won't be able to stand on her own. And once you've spread the glue, just press the two fairies together. Now, if you're not using a fast drying glue, you may have to come back if the two fairies start to open. You may have to come back and just press them together again. And next, I'm just going to glue her sleeve together. We're going to leave the arms for last because that's a very important step. And now glue her head area together. And just be careful with the neck that you're not opening up the head too much because you might run the risk of creating a crease in your paper. And now let's glue the arm and hands together. So here, let me just show you with my X-Acto knife where the glue will stop. So right about there, above that X-Acto knife line is where you don't want any glue because her hands need to stay open to hold the cards. Now, if you're just making a fairy without the cards, you can glue the whole thing together, but just stop right at her wrist with your glue and try to keep a fairly straight line with that area where her hand is. And there we have it. Just press the two arms together. And here, be careful that you don't put too much glue here, because you know when you press the two arms together, the glue will run beyond the area that you've glued. So some of it might run into the hand area, and then you're not going to be able to pry the hand open. And that's it. Your fairy is pretty much done. Just open her wings up and her legs, and then she's ready to hold a name card for you. Now let me just show you how you place the name card in her hands. You just place it in between her two hands. Make sure that you also pry her thumbs apart, and it might be a little bit tricky getting it in, but it should go in there. If for some reason the glue ran into her hands, like I mentioned earlier, you can take an X-Acto knife and kind of just slip it in there to cut the glue open. And here you want to be careful, because if you pry her hands open too far, like I am here, you won't be able to close those hands together again, and then the card will sit pretty loosely in those hands. So just be careful about that. If that should happen and the card doesn't want to sit between her hands just because of a lot of handling, you can just put little small dabs of glue on her hand so that she holds the card up better. Now the other thing I want to mention is this fairy will be blown over with the slightest breeze. She's not perfectly stable. So I wouldn't recommend her for an outdoor party, but if you do want to use her for an outdoor party or somewhere where you think it's going to be breezy, you can open her feet up all the way to 90 degrees and then place some double-sided tape under there so that she'll sit down flat on the surface, and then nothing can blow her over in that case. But of course, just make sure you're using something that's surface friendly. And that's it. Our fairy is done. Thank you so much for following along. If you're interested in my future products, please subscribe below, and I'll put up my Instagram and Pinterest also at the end of this video. If you want to follow me, I post daily pictures of all my products in different colors, different paper finishes, and I also put up sneak peeks of upcoming projects.